Hi there, my name is Oak Norton, and I've been involved in education issues for over a decade now. I was invited to give this talk at the Newquist Breakfast in October 2015 in Salt Lake City, Utah. Unfortunately, due to technical difficulties, they weren't able to record the speech, so I'm recording it in full in order to share this message, which I believe is important. Here's my speech entitled Desperate Times. I'm grateful for the opportunity to be able to speak with you today. Some of you know I've been heavily involved in education issues for about a decade now. Today I want to share with you the precipice we are on, part of my vision with you about education, and some solutions which you can participate in. I believe everyone is here for a reason, and it's a choice to fully engage with the Lord and discover your life's purpose. When Nehemiah returned from captivity to rebuild the walls of Jerusalem and was questioned, he said, quote, "The God of heaven, he will prosper us. Therefore, we, his servants, will arise and build." End quote. I'll circle back to this idea of building toward the end of my talk. First, let's understand what has been built, and it's not about protecting us and our families. For the past 150 years since Horace Mann helped institute free and compulsory education in America, the education system has declined. Compulsory education was resisted and was enforced at gunpoint in Massachusetts. The goal was conformity and obedience. Eventually, the one-room schoolhouse gave way to age-divided grades. Then more time at school was required. There was less time to be children, less time with your family, and then removal of prayer and God from schools. These things led to a loss of morals, a loss of religion, and a loss of context for why we learn. Then the Department of Education was created in Washington. Charlotte Iserbyt was Reagan's senior policy advisor over education, and she blew the whistle on them in her incredible book, The Deliberate Dumbing Down of America. With Fed Ed, one bad idea after another has been promulgated upon the American people. Scheme after scheme failed. A few biggies you'll recognize are outcome-based education, Goals 2000, No Child Left Behind, and now Common Core. Just a month ago, a federal official involved with Common Core state standards admitted that the feds intentionally coerced the states onto Common Core. The very thing that state departments of education kept saying didn't happen was finally admitted to. Another massive experiment that is going to prove a failure, but it won't stop the feds from trying to complete their takeover of the system. There will be more fads and experiments on our children until we comply and are in submission or overthrow this beast and return education to where it should be. So what are some of the troubling things happening today? The four major Common Core reforms initiated new standards, mandated data collection, federally funded and aligned testing, redistribution of teachers based on test scores, and a host of other changes. The feds then changed FERPA law implementation policy, which was designed to protect privacy so personally identifiable information can now be shared about our children without our knowledge. They've put cameras in the classroom to monitor teachers. Armbands and devices monitoring children to obtain psychological and behavioral profiling. The Common Core SAGE test by AIR is a behavioral test. Opt your children out of this test right now. In fact, opt them out of almost all state tests. In fact, I have to start encouraging parents to homeschool or private school their children in schools that don't take government money. That's really the only place that you can protect your children. The Secretary of Education, Arne Duncan, recently changed federal policy to no longer authorize a state to define modified academic achievement standards and develop alternate assessments. One teacher noted that one reason the feds want all the special ed students to take regular assessments is so that they will lower the grades in classrooms in order to encourage more federal controls to be placed on schools. Arne Duncan also said in a December 2012 speech, quote, "We have to learn to think very, very differently about time. I think our school day is too short. I think our school week is too short. I think our school year is too short." End quote. In short, let's take those kids away from their parents and really mold them. The College Board is aligning the SAT, ACT, CLEP, AP, and GED exams with Common Core. No longer will these be college entrance exams, but compliance tests to ensure you are instructed in high school. The 2015 SAT scores are in before that test has been aligned to Common Core, and students scored the lowest in 40 years. This is why they have to change the tests, to mask the true effect Common Core is having on education. Trade organizations created Common Core, not the states, and the focus on schooling is being more and more turned to job training instead of education. The Chambers of Commerce and National Governors Association talk of talent pipelines for global workforce plans, reducing us to human capital instead of addressing unique talents and strengths for individuals. Utah's education officials love to say that we haven't received any money for Common Core, so we aren't tied to it. Yet they took $9 million a few years ago to set up the P20W SLDS database, which covers preschool through grades 20 and into the workforce, in order to support the federally mandated data collection system. 500 data points were asked for by the feds, including blood type, dental records, and religious affiliation. In the last couple weeks, we've learned Utah applied for and got another few $1,000,000 to improve distribution of data from this database. The school-to-work and cradle-to-grave concepts that were rejected 20 years ago are being fully embraced by people today. In recent years, we even get talk of prenatal tracking in state databases to improve our data and ensure children are entering school prepared for it. In Britain, state employees are assigned to children at birth to ensure they are properly taken care of. We can't even tend babies without government intervention. The National PTA just issued a statement on support of data. Quote, "The ideal data pathway would begin prenatally or at birth and continue throughout the child's education." They also wrote, quote, "Too often, early childhood data come in numbers, through a few work samples, or via anecdotal written explanations, and can sometimes feel abstract and subjective to families. By using children's drawings as data, early childhood teachers and parents can track a child's developmental progress. Tools of the Mind is an early childhood program designed to help preschool and kindergarten children regulate their social, emotional, and cognitive behaviors. As children create their play plans, teachers simultaneously rate the plan according to a rubric designed by tools that is based on child development principles." End quote. Another. Federal officials openly talk about how the White House's learning registry will allow them to filter what websites get to teachers and students. Want to become a teacher? In Illinois, you have to go through Pearson Publishing, one of the major corporations involved with Common Core. They now hold authority to decide if you can. The push for STEM and the new Common Core science standards mash political hot potatoes all across the standards so children get global warming and evolution indoctrination repeatedly in middle school, hardly the age for such discussions outside the view of parents. And competency-based education, which is merely another name for outcome-based education, just got the full support of some Utah legislators who held a conference in southern Utah to garner support for it. Former U.S. Congressman Bob Schaefer obtained the letter Mark Tucker wrote to Hillary Clinton and fought to get entered into the congressional record in the 90s. He called it, quote, "the most concise, honest, and transparent political document of its kind." He said the blueprint quote, "entails merging nationalized primary education goals with a nationalized higher education system and a nationalized labor administrative function," end quote. In other words, a national database, which is now in place, to track people from cradle to grave and ensure we have children being trained for jobs through national standards. C.S. Lewis warned us, "If education is beaten by training, civilization dies." Likewise, LDS scholar Hugh Nibley said, "When the economy becomes the main and engrossing concern of a society, the economy will self-destruct." These are the times we live in. In Utah, the governor and many members of the business community are heavily pushing Prosperity 2020. Prosperity 2020 in turn pushes Common Core and a myopic focus on jobs and the economy. Jobs, jobs, jobs. That's all we hear about these days. Today we're told you go to school to get a job. It's about being trained to eat carrots, not educated with choice to plant the variety of food we want. In older days, it was more about glorifying God by using the talents God had given you to be of use to God. If we can remain humble through the process of becoming learned, God can do something with us to advance His work and glory. Another one, President Obama just issued an executive order to federal agencies to use behavioral data to provide better services to citizens. What does that mean? It means that trained psychologists will nudge people toward correct behavior. The path has been opened up to monitor citizens and build a database of information that encompasses values, beliefs, attitudes, and behaviors. That information is then used to nudge people toward proper behavior. Who came up with this idea? President Obama's regulatory czar, Cass Sunstein, who wrote the book entitled Nudge. Don't you wish you could turn back the clock and be a child again? The good news? Teacher support for Common Core has dropped from 76% to 40% in 2 years. Bad news is many good teachers saw what was happening and retired because they weren't going to be a part of the child abuse that comes with Common Core. Some teachers I know actually took their own children out of school and now homeschool them. The big push for one-to-one devices also has a negative side. Who is creating the content to be delivered on these devices that will be customized for our children? Oh, Common Core aligned companies. When the parent and teacher are removed and someone else is pushing content to them, if they detect wrong thinking or wrong values, or have access to the database on a child and know that child's tendencies and learning style, what content might pop up to help nudge that person in the right direction of thinking and behavior? You see the problems. We all do. There are many who don't or won't because they have a normalcy bias. Nobody wants to believe there's a problem of this nature because school is so personal for families. Oh, my child loves that teacher. They're learning such good things. 10 years ago, I got started in educational advocacy. Our school district had quit teaching the times tables and long division, and as a CPA, I found that disturbing. Since time is short, I'll skip the details, but with others, we got the state to raise math standards in 2007. We went from D-rated standards to A-. However, the State Office of Education wasn't happy about that, and when Common Core came out with a chance to get federal money, they jumped at the chance and adopted Common Core without ever having seen the standards. It's insane. At about this time, I asked myself, what were the true principles of education? I didn't have an answer. I realized that many teachers had been brainwashed by schools of education into false principles. I realized that the public at large had difficulty understanding and accepting that something was wrong with the system itself. It's a product of, hey, I went through public schools and turned out okay. My children and grandchildren will be fine. So in 2010, I wanted to understand what real education should look like. I invited about 80 people from all around the state in all areas of education, public, private, homeschool, higher ed, board members, and legislators. Out of this day-long meeting emerged 5 core principles, a mission statement, and a bunch of other ideas. We formed a nonprofit organization called Agency-Based Education. Each year we hold a conference. This year it's on November 14th in Provo, and it's going to be great. You can find out details later today at agencybasededucation.org. Here are our 5 core principles. An education must be based in choice and not compulsion. An education helps develop an internal moral compass as one fosters a recognition and love of truth. It recognizes that truth best inspires when sought from original source materials. An education should be individualized to allow children to identify and develop their gifts and talents and discover their life's missions. And an education must recognize that parents have the sovereign stewardship to guide their children's educational journey. If you support the ideas I've talked about, I encourage you to help us advance these principles. So what does it mean to be an independent adult? Do we structure adults' lives by the hour? Do we tell adults what to learn, what to take an interest in, define a set of curriculum they must pursue? No. Adults are free, but we are mostly determined to compel children through a set of curriculum that we went through as if that's the best path for everyone. Now, I agree everyone needs certain basic knowledge. 200 years ago, that meant 3 years of free public schooling that taught you to read, write, and do basic math. And 99% of the population was deemed literate. At that time, it meant capable of reading and discussing the newspaper articles of the day, for instance, the Federalist Papers. Then compulsory education was implemented, and literacy rates dropped to about 91% and haven't risen. When people today talk about literacy rates, we are so far below what minimal schooling led to back then, it's pathetic. Sure, we have a broader base of subject matter now, and with 13 years of school for several hours a day, one expects that children will learn more. But we have lost freedom. Freedom to learn what we choose, freedom to explore, freedom to play, and freedom to direct our own time. We've learned to rely on direction from others, when in reality we should be establishing a framework and context for self-learning. For example, one might adopt this mantra: God has sent me to earth for a purpose, and I must become of value to fulfill my life's mission. I shall seek to glorify God through my hard work and use my free will to advance His work and glory. To another, their context might be, I value the principles of freedom and want to learn all I can to protect and preserve liberty. About 13 years ago, I came upon a talk given in the April 1965 LDS General Conference by Ezra Taft Benson entitled Not Commanded in All Things. You can find it online. It was the single most powerful talk I'd ever read in my life. It stripped me bare of my excuses, and I was made to know that I needed to be involved. At the time I read it, I didn't know exactly what area I needed to be involved in. There are many issues that need addressed. But education is the issue that defines our futures. And when my daughter wasn't being taught basic math skills by design, I got involved and saw the Lord open doors for me to take on this issue. If the rising generation loses sight of freedom and has its behaviors modified toward government objectives, it's game over. There is no greater issue than protecting our children from having their values, attitudes, and beliefs, particularly toward God and religion, compromised. As I started doing research into these people, I became more and more alarmed at the agenda they had going on behind the scenes. Charles Potter, a Unitarian minister and co-signer with John Dewey of the Humanist Manifesto, said, quote, education is thus a most powerful ally of humanism, and every American public school is a school of humanism. What can the theistic Sunday schools, meeting for an hour once a week and teaching only a fraction of the children, do to stem the tide of a 5-day program of humanistic teaching? End quote. John Goodlad, nationally recognized education expert, said, quote, most youth still hold the same values of their parents. If we do not alter this pattern, if we don't re-socialize, our system will decay. End quote. Would it surprise you that for 25 years, John Goodlad was the primary consultant for BYU's education department? Benjamin Bloom, the education psychologist, said, quote, a student attains higher order thinking when he no longer believes in right or wrong. A large part of what we call good teaching is a teacher's ability to obtain effective objectives by challenging the student's fixed beliefs. A large part of what we call teaching is that the teacher should be able to use education to reorganize a child's thoughts, attitudes, and feelings. End quote. What I've learned over these last several years is that when schools talk about children needing critical thinking skills, what it really means to those who set national agendas is children must be taught to think critically about what their parents have taught them about religion and our founding fathers. Clearly, we have big problems. However, the solutions are small and simple things. Most are solved by local control, first in the family, and then smaller districts for more local governance. How does one become an activist or involved in issues? LDS General Authority Boyd K. Packer said, quote, there is no question, personal or social or political or occupational, that need go unanswered. In the Scriptures is contained the fullness of the everlasting gospel. Therein we find principles of truth that will resolve every confusion and every problem and every dilemma that will face the human family or any individual in it. End quote. Therefore, I'm going to turn to a scriptural example. The story is from the Book of Mormon. The prophet Nephi's family had been led out of Jerusalem, arrived at the seashore, and they're waiting on the Lord for further instructions. It's the question we all have to ask once we become spiritually awake. Lord, what would you have me do? In 1 Nephi chapter 17, this is what Nephi recorded. And it came to pass that after I, Nephi, had been in the land of Bountiful for the space of many days, and the voice of the Lord came unto me, saying, Arise, and get thee into the mountain. And it came to pass that I arose and went up into the mountain, and cried unto the Lord. And it came to pass that the Lord spake unto me, saying, Thou shalt construct a ship after the manner which I shall show thee, that I may carry thy people across these waters. Many tasks that we may receive from the Lord will stretch us and cause us to do things we aren't comfortable with or have any experience with. What should be our answer to such direction? This is what Nephi said. And I said, Lord, whither shall I go that I may find ore to molten, that I may make tools to construct the ship after the manner which thou hast shown unto me? And it came to pass that the Lord told me whither I should go to find ore, that I might make tools. When we get instruction and feel inadequate, we just need to ask the Lord for direction, even to know how to make the tools we need to do the job. Many of you know this story and how his brothers gave him grief and told him he couldn't do it, and at times refused their help. Here's the rest of their story. And the Lord did show me from time to time after what manner I should work the timbers of the ship. Now I, Nephi, did not work the timbers after the manner which was learned by men, neither did I build the ship after the manner of men, but I did build it after the manner which the Lord had shown unto me, wherefore it was not after the manner of men. And I, Nephi, did go into the mount oft, and I did pray oft unto the Lord, wherefore the Lord showed unto me great things. And it came to pass that after I had finished the ship, according to the word of the Lord, my brethren beheld that it was good, and that the workmanship thereof was exceedingly fine, wherefore they did humble themselves again before the Lord. The Lord will prepare a way for you to be involved. He will help you. As I mentioned at the beginning of this talk, I feel we're each here for a purpose. Neal A. Maxwell, a past apostle in the LDS Church, stated, quote, The Lord in the Doctrine and Covenants tells us to be anxiously engaged in good causes. This suggests that we can't respond to all causes. We must be selective in the things we seek to do in terms of community and civic chores. But it also suggests we ought to devote a measure of our time and talent to do these things, for they do count on the scales of action as God sees it. The world is full of fads. The world is full of the marches of lemmings to the sea. The world is full of causes that lead into conceptual cul-de-sacs. Our task, therefore, is to be wise in the selection of good causes, using the scriptures and the modern prophets as our guide. Anne Morrow Lindbergh, in her book, Gift from the Sea, says, quote, My life cannot implement in action all the demands of all the people to whom my heart responds. End quote. Continuing Elder Maxwell, You will care for more things than you will be able to do things about. Wise selection of causes is one of the highest forms of the use of free agency that there is, and really, one of the ways God tests our basic wisdom and our capacity to love. My calling at this time is to understand and promote true principles of education and encourage their adoption by families and, where possible, schools and governments. You may feel called to another battle. That's okay. We're all needed to engage in the fight. Just begin by fully committing yourself to the Lord and let Him light your way to get your tools and build your ship. When you obtain your sense of mission, you will receive power and energy. It helps you focus and have determination. When you know you're doing the Lord's work, you just keep plugging along, praying for continued guidance and capacity to carry out the instructions you receive. We all need to play our part in the symphony of life. Those that the Lord has blessed with an understanding of freedom are responsible to preserve it. My continued prayer is for the Lord to continue to awaken people and strengthen each of us with the capacity to fulfill His purposes. Thank you.